hopes of this Pierre Leduc affair of which I told you. What a strange story it is! Have you found the man I mean? Where do we stand? I am most anxious to know. The letter is signed 'Steinweg.' The 1st of June," continued M. Lenormand, "is to day. I have ordered one of my inspectors to hunt me out this Steinweg. I have no doubt that he will succeed." "Nor I, no doubt at all," cried Valenglay, rising from his chair. "And I make you every apology, my dear Lenormand, and my humble confession. I was on the point of letting you slide, for good and all. To morrow I was expecting the prefect of police and M. Weber." "I knew that, Monsieur le Président." "Impossible!" "But for that, should I have put myself out? You now see my plan of campaign. On the one side, I am setting traps in which the murderer will be caught sooner or later. Pierre Leduc or Steinweg will deliver him into my hands. On the other side, I am on Arsène Lupin's heels. 2 of his agents are in my pay and he believes them to be his most devoted helpers. In addition to this, he is working for me, because he is pursuing the perpetrator of the threefold crime as I am. Only he imagines that he is dishing me, whereas it is I who am dishing him. So I shall succeed, but on one condition." "What is that?" "That I am given free scope and allowed to act according to the needs of the moment, without troubling about the public, who are growing impatient, or my superiors, who are intriguing against me." "I agree." "In that case, Monsieur le Président, in a few days from this, I shall be the victor, or I shall be dead." At Saint Cloud, a little villa situated on one of the highest points of the upland, in an unfrequented road. It was 11 o'clock at night. M. Lenormand left his car at Saint Cloud and walked cautiously along the road. A shadow appeared. "Is that you, Gourel?" "Yes, chief." "Did you tell the brothers Doudeville that I was coming?" "Yes, your room is ready. You can go to bed and sleep. Unless they try to carry off Pierre Leduc to night, which would not surprise me, considering the behaviour of the fellow whom the Doudevilles saw." They walked across the garden, softly entered the house and went up to the first floor. The 2 brothers, Jean and Jacques Doudeville, were there. "No news of Prince Sernine?" asked Lenormand. "No, chief." "What about Pierre Leduc?" "He spends the whole day lying flat on his back in his room on the ground floor, or else in the garden. He never comes up to see us." "Is he better?" "Much better. The rest has made a great change in his appearance." "Is he wholly devoted to Lupin?" "To Prince Sernine rather, for he does not suspect that the 2 are one and the same man. At least, I suppose so. One never knows with him. He does not speak at all. Oh, he's a queer fish! There's only one person who has the gift of cheering him up, of making him talk and even laugh. That's a young girl from Garches, to whom Prince Sernine introduced him. Geneviève Ernemont, her name is. She has been here 3 times already. She was here to day." He added, jestingly, "I believe there's a little flirting going on. It's like His Highness Prince Sernine and Mrs. Kesselbach. It seems he's making eyes at her. That devil of a Lupin!" M. Lenormand did not reply. But it was obvious that all these details, to which he seemed to attach no importance, were noted in the recesses of his memory, to be used whenever he might need to draw the logical inferences from them. He lit a cigar, chewed it without smoking it, lit it again and dropped it. He asked 2 or 3 more questions and then, dressed as he was, threw himself on his bed. "If the least thing happens, let me be awakened. If not, I shall sleep through the night. Go to your posts, all of you." The others left the room. An hour passed. 2 hours. Suddenly, M. Lenormand felt some one touch him and Gourel said to him: "Get up, chief. They have opened the gate." "1 man or 2?" "I only saw 1. The moon appeared just then. He crouched down against a hedge." "And the brothers Doudeville?" "I sent them out by the back. They will cut off his retreat when the time comes." Gourel took M. Lenormand's hand, led him downstairs and then into a little dark room. "Don't stir, chief. We are in Pierre Leduc's dressing room. I am opening the door of the recess in which his bed stands. Don't be afraid. He has taken his veronal, as he does every evening. Nothing can wake him. Come this way. It's a good hiding place, isn't it? These are the curtains of his bed. From here you can see the window and the whole side of the room between the window and the bed." The casement stood open and admitted a vague light, which became very precise at times, when the moon burst through her veil of clouds. The 2 men did not take their eyes from the empty window frame, feeling certain that the event which they were awaiting would come from that side. A slight creaking noise. "He is climbing the trellis," whispered Gourel. "Is it high?" "6 feet or so." The creaking became more distinct. "Go, Gourel," muttered M. Lenormand. "Find the Doudevilles, bring them back to the foot of the wall and bar the road to any one who tries to get down this way." Gourel went. At the same moment, a head appeared at the level of the window. Then a leg was flung over the balcony. M. Lenormand distinguished a slenderly built man, below the middle height, dressed in dark colours and without a hat. The man turned and, leaning over the balcony, looked for a few seconds into space, as though to make sure that no danger threatened him. Then he stooped down and lay at full length on the floor. He appeared motionless. But soon M. Lenormand realized that the still blacker shadow which he formed against the surrounding darkness was coming forward, nearer. It reached the bed. M. Lenormand had an impression that he could hear the man's breathing and, at the same time, that he could just see his eyes, keen, glittering eyes which pierced the darkness like shafts of fire and which themselves could see through that same darkness. Pierre Leduc gave a deep sigh and turned over. A fresh silence. The man had glided along the bed with imperceptible movements and his dark outline now stood out against the whiteness of the sheets that hung down to the floor. M. Lenormand could have touched him by putting out his arm. This time, he clearly distinguished the breathing, which alternated with that of the sleeper, and he had the illusion that he also heard the sound of a heart beating. Suddenly, a flash of light, the man had pressed the spring of an electric lantern, and Pierre Leduc was lit full in the face, but the man remained in the shade, so that M. Lenormand was unable to see his features. All that he saw was something that shone in the bright space, and he shuddered. It was the blade of a knife; and that thin, tapering knife, more like a stiletto than a dagger, seemed to him identical with the weapon which he had picked up by the body of Chapman, Mr. Kesselbach's secretary. He put forth all his will power to restrain himself from springing upon the man. He wanted first to know what the man had come to do. The hand was raised. Was he going to strike? M. Lenormand calculated the distance in order to stop the blow. But no, it was not a murderous gesture, but one of caution. The hand would only fall if Pierre Leduc stirred or tried to call out. And the man bent over the sleeper, as though he were examining something. "The right cheek," thought M. Lenormand. "The scar on the right cheek. He wants to make sure that it is really Pierre Leduc." The man had turned a little to one side, so that only his shoulders were visible. But his clothes, his overcoat, were so near that they brushed against the curtains behind which M. Lenormand was hiding. "One movement on his part," thought the chief detective, "a thrill of alarm, and I shall collar him." But the man, entirely absorbed in his examination, did not stir. At last, after shifting the dagger to the hand that held the lantern, he raised the sheet, at first hardly at all, then a little more, then more still, until the sleeper's left arm was uncovered and the hand laid bare. The flash of the lantern shone upon the hand. The fingers lay outspread. The little finger was cut on the second joint. Again Pierre Leduc made a movement. The light was immediately put out; and, for an instant, the man remained beside the bed, motionless, standing straight up. Would he make up his mind to strike? M. Lenormand underwent the agony of the crime which he could so easily prevent, but which he did not want to forestall before the very last second. A very long silence. Suddenly, he saw, or rather fancied that he saw, an arm uplifted. Instinctively he moved, stretching his hand above the sleeper. In making this gesture, he hit against the man. A dull cry. The fellow struck out at space, defended himself at random and fled toward the window. But M. Lenormand had leapt upon him and had his two arms around the man's shoulders. He at once felt him yielding and, as the weaker of the two, powerless in Lenormand's hands, trying to avoid the struggle and to slip from between his arms. Lenormand, exerting all his strength, held him flat against his chest, bent him in two and stretched him on his back on the floor. "I've got him! I've got him!" he muttered triumphantly. And he felt a singular elation at imprisoning that terrifying criminal, that unspeakable monster, in his irresistible grip. He felt him living and quivering, enraged and desperate, their two lives mingled, their breaths blended. "Who are you?" he asked. "Who are you? You'll have to speak." And he clasped the enemy's body with still greater force, for he had an impression that that body was diminishing between his arms, that it was vanishing. He gripped harder and harder. And suddenly he shuddered from head to foot. He still felt, a tiny prick in the throat. In his exasperation, he gripped harder yet. The pain increased. And he observed that the man had succeeded in twisting one arm round, slipping his hand to his chest and holding the dagger on end. The arm, it was true, was incapable of motion. But the closer M. Lenormand tightened his grip, the deeper did the point of the dagger enter the proffered flesh. He flung back his head a little to escape the point,